years. Vedanta wing of Hinduism. It's been said that life itself, or the life force that animates us, that gives us life, or the Buddha mind, or infinite, timeless, and spaceless awareness, is our real teacher. So the physical teacher, the human teacher, is a reflection of our own being, and we learn to find our own true self by realizing the oneness with the true being of ourselves and our human teacher. So he's kind of, the human teacher is kind of a role model for that. And when I'm reflecting on the difficulties I still have in the spiritual realm with practice, fear of sensations comes up for me is a primary impediment. It's still there, and I know that I share that with many other people. For me, the power to feel is what we're actually made of. It's the most direct way of knowing our oneness with everything. For me, anyway, and I know it's not necessarily that way for everybody, but for me, that's what I feel like I can talk about more clearly as a way to try and articulate and express where the difficulty really lies. So our power to feel is always there with us. You know, there's no feeling, and our feeling is not something separate from our true identity. It's an expression of our real identity. You know, when we feel things, we have to be there first to feel them. If we're not there, there's no feeling. So our feeling is something that's closer than close, the power to feel. It's closer than close because it's not close to us, it is us. Some teachers will, to demonstrate the oneness within our self, not the self, I am this or that, but just the I am of the presence that's here and now, will say, stand up and try and take a step closer or a step away from yourself, or try to take a step closer to yourself. And that's one way of realizing that we always are totally what we are. We can't move any further or closer to what we are because we always are just what we are. And it's the same with our feelings. We can't get any closer or farther away from our feelings. There's no feeling that's closer. Feelings can be intense or less intense, but there's no feeling that's closer or farther away from what we are. So, like, you know, waves on the ocean are manifest differently from the depths and the vastness of the ocean itself, but they're both made of water. And so our feelings, our sensations, our life force manifests in many different ways, but it's all made of the same stuffless stuff, that which is present, but which by itself, but in itself can't be described or perceived. It's formless and it manifests form at the same time. So many teachers will say, when they talk about God, they'll say, or the source, they'll say, God is both form and formless. So when we look at the fear of pain, fear of painful sensations, I realize that for me, there's still something, when I hear the teaching that it's all one and there's nothing to fear, really. Not even pain. We don't need to fear pain. We don't need to fear sensations, really. There's still a part of me that wants some type of certainty. Like, is it really true? For sure. I mean, you know, and then there's also that, you know, well, if I can test, it takes a lot of courage to test that. Like, how much pain can you take? Or does it really matter what happens to the body, the physical body, what type of torture or whatever? Some of that feels a little adolescent to me, but it's very primal. It may be primitive, but it's primal, and it's definitely still a part of what I am. And I think many people can identify with that fear of suffering. You know, just look at the recent past year and some months of the pandemic and that fear that we all experienced, wondering what was going to happen. So, you know, the thing in the idea of certainty, when you want certainty, you're wanting something certain. You want to be certain about something, but we can't really be certain of, at least not in our thinking mind, not in the energy of our thinking, can we be certain that that our essential being will rescue us from the depths of agonizing pain or something. There's no certainty in the thinking mind. But many teachers who are very advanced will say that, there is a stage of discovering fearlessness, and it's so new and it's so one's own, that it's so, that it's there. You don't know it through the thinking mind, you know it through just being it. So the question of doubt isn't there because there's no clinging to thoughts about it. It's just obvious that whatever comes up is part of us. And there's no finding of any actual entity in sensations, in our thinking, in our idea of being a separate body mind. So in that process of kind of gradually moving from the confine, feeling confined to a separate body mind, towards realizing that our true identity is the vast openness of timeless, spaceless awareness. In that process, part of what is becoming clearer and clearer to me is that we need to, instead of trying to find certainty through our thinking about it, we need to actually have the courage to face what is, face suffering, face pain, not searching for it, not trying to grab onto it, but also not moving away from it, being willing to find the courage to not. Of course, in our practical life, we do, but finding the courage to really open to more and more, within reason, and not to really be hard on ourselves, to be open to what is, and to really deeply question and open to the deeper teacher of life. Because fear itself is a teaching. It's an opening, and it's a reminder that there's more opening to do. There's more acceptance and compassion that we can become aware of and begin to embody. So part of what is helping me with this problem is being willing to explore what is my actual experience of sensations. So what are sensations really like when we open to them, open to breathe with them. Breathing is helpful because it's one activity, like our heartbeat and our thinking energy, is is going on continuously on its own. So we can connect to the life force itself through our breathing, and we can feel the sensations of the breath and connect them to other sensations in our body, which are either joyful, neutral, or painful. But what is becoming clear to me is that when we let go of the discursive thought in all tranquility practices, contemplative tranquility practices that I've practiced, focus on letting go of discursive thought. So if we just let our thinking energy go with with our feelings and other sensory experience, if we just open to what is happening on its own, we'll begin to realize that sensations themselves are neutral. It's just our ideas about them. Whenever there's suffering involved, there's the thought, I don't like this, and then there's a feeling in the body there that connects with that gives us the feeling of suffering. So one thing is, a question I ask myself when I am suffering is, what is this actual experience of suffering like when I let go of that thought of, I don't like this? And so that helps. And then also, when I do that, it becomes more clear to me that I'm just with the sensation as it is, and that it's always moving, and there's all these little intricate parts, these different maybe vibratory qualities, moving qualities that are there, and there's no edge to the sensation. There's no space that it occupies necessarily. There's a duration to the experience of it, but there's no edge. There's no box that it's confined in. It's just kind of free floating and moving and changing constantly. And where is the actual entity there in that sensation, in all the sensations we experience? So I haven't been able to find any actual entity there. Just like with thinking, if we ask ourselves, what is the actual substance of thinking? What is the actual substance of a sensation? You can't really pinpoint it. It can reflect with form, and it's also formless, So what is there? Is there really something in dealing with pain? We can ask, is there really something there we need to be afraid of? Right? I have a peanut allergy, and the suffering gets very intense when I accidentally eat something, and it gets worse as you get older. So I've had some near-death experiences with that. And what's gotten me through it, of course, is the help I get in the ER, but also just looking at, well, what is so really, really terrible about this? There's no real entity there. And fortunately, I haven't left my body yet from it, but it could have happened. And, in retrospect, and also in that accepting and opening and just letting the pain go where it needs to go, there was a peace. There's always been a peace there. And the more we can fully open to the pain, more deeply, fully feel our life force. And we can more deeply recognize our shared being, that we come to recognize a deeper level of shared being when we suffer. One teacher, I'm blanking on his name, but he wrote the Tibetan book of living and dying. I think Sogyal Rinpoche. And he said, when we realize that we are dying and that we don't control the dying process, we don't control the suffering process, there is a really profound depth of compassion and generosity that we bring to our own suffering and to the suffering of others. When we realize we are dying and that all beings are dying along with us, this is when this depth of compassion brings us to a deeper recognition of our shared being with all beings. And we deeply want to relieve that suffering for ourselves and for all beings together. So I think, and this also has brought me to a realization that the fixation on being a separate body mind or on being a person, that's what's actually suffering. And that, when we ask that question, what is the experience of suffering without that idea of being a person, without being a confined person in a box of or a container of self? What is the actual experience of suffering like? And we come to experiencing pain, and it still hurts, and it's still bothersome, and we still wish it wasn't there. But it can actually hurt more and at the same time bother us less, because there's an acceptance of the hurt. And there can be an acceptance of the intensity of hurt. It's more intense, but it's still the same life force. still the same vastly open life force. And we learn how to bring generosity and patience with our own suffering. In that way, we learn how to be more fully free to share it with others, more fully free to deeply experience the depths of our life, the depths of joy, the depths of suffering, and to know more and more, with more and more certainty in our being, this joy, this bliss, that we're committed to ending of suffering for all beings.